Hello, everybody. This is Jimmy. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to analyze the first page of Alice in Wonderland. The reason we want to analyze this and look at it, any book, whether it's Alice in Wonderland or the other classics we're going to read, is that the first page, the first part, the first sentence, the first paragraphs are the most important part of the story. Sets the tone, gives us an idea of who's talking. And it's very important if you're going to appreciate and understand the entire story to go over this a little bit. So I'm going to use Adobe Acrobat to highlight some of the things that we're going to talk about. The chapter 1, Down the Rabbit Hole, which we read, has the first sentence. This sentence is a long sentence. The definition of a sentence, of course, is a complete thought. A complete thought has a subject and a verb. What's a subject? That's usually a noun, which is the name of a person, place, or thing. And a verb is an action word. So if you look at all these words, and by the way, there's 57 words in this first sentence. It's amazing, right? What's the subject of the sentence? Well, the subject is pretty easy to figure out. It's basically Alice. Let's draw a little sign here. That's the subject. The subject is Alice. It's the name of the person in the story that the narrator is talking about. And we're going to ask a very important question here I want you to keep in mind. Who is narrating the story? Keep that in mind as we talk about the story. So Alice, and then the rest of the sentence says, was beginning to get very tired sitting by her sister on the bank, and of having nothing to do. Once or twice she peeped into her book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. What's the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversation? That's a long sentence. What's the verb? Well, the verb is actually Alice was doing something. The word was is something, but in this case, Alice, this is the verb, was tired. Was tired. Alice was tired. So if we were to rewrite the 57 words into a single complete thought, Alice was tired. Great. That's the essence of the sentence. But Alice was tired doesn't tell us much. It doesn't tell us what Alice was, why she was tired, what she was doing, where she was tired. So the narrator of the story, okay, and there's two types of narrators I want you to keep in mind. There's the first person narrator who is inside the story. Sorry. Okay. And then there's the second person, or the third person narrator who is outside the story. You look at the first sentence here, Alice was beginning to get very tired. Somebody's saying that. It's not Alice saying that. If Alice was saying that, she would say, I was beginning to get very tired. And she doesn't use the word I. The word is Alice. So who is saying this? Well, my hunch, my guess, is it's somebody outside the story. It's the third person narrator, somewhere outside the story. That narrator is not inside the story with Alice. It's not her sister either. She's sitting on the bank by her sister. If her sister was narrating the story, it would read something like Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by me on the bank, by me. But that's not her sister narrating the story. So who's telling this to us? Well, it's the third person narrator. Now, why is that important? Well, we're going to find out in a moment. It's important if you look at this sentence because the narrator takes us into Alice's mind. Going into Alice's mind is a very important part of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland because the narrator tells us what Alice is thinking. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversation? So we cannot see into each other's heads. We can't read each other's thoughts. Sometimes when we're talking to people, we might make a face unknowingly and the person can guess what we're thinking. But for the most part, people's thoughts are hidden from us. One of the first signs that it's a third person narrator is when the narrator reveals what a person is thinking. That's important to know. Before we go to the next sentence, which is also pretty long, it is like 55 or 54 words, I want to point out some punctuation to you. What is punctuation? Punctuation are marks that help us, the readers, understand what the narrator is telling us. Punctuation is guiding us in the rhythm of the story. So, for example, this is a colon. A colon is a stop, but it's not a complete stop like a period. You can see the period later on the second page when the ending of that second page comes up. But basically, what I'd like to talk about is the colon, which is a stop. It's not a complete stop. It's a strong stop, stronger than a comma. This is a comma. Now, I'm going to be pointing out what you may know these things. Jimmy, I know what a comma is. I know what a question mark is because this sentence ends in a question mark. See it? I know what they are, but you really don't. You should use these in your reading voice. Your reading voice is inside your head when you read the sentence carefully, and the punctuation guides your pauses, your stops, whether your voice goes up or whether your voice goes down. So, for example, that colon is a strong stop. That's telling us that there's going to be another thought coming up, that the narrator isn't finished telling us what Alice is tired about. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversation? So she was looking, she peeped. There's a great word. I want you to always read with a pencil, take notes, write on the margins. You see this underline in the first sentence. That's my underlining when I read this book with a little check mark to the right. Why? Because it's important. I told you the first sentence is very important, first paragraph. But if you don't know what peeping is, then you should go to Google and look it up, or you should go to a dictionary and look it up. That's how you're going to gain vocabulary. Peeping is another word of peeking, if you peek, or you peep. You can buy peeps at Easter time, right? Those little yellow birds that you eat. Peeps. Why do they call them peeps? Anyway, she peeped into the book. What does that mean? She kind of like peeked into it, but she saw quickly that it had no pictures or conversation, and she was pretty like, oh my God, what kind of book is that? You see what I'm saying? All right. The next sentence continues. So that's really Alice was tired, but all of those other words enrich that sentence. They enrich it. That's what punctuation does. That's what other words do. They enrich the simple sentence, because that's a simple sentence. The next paragraph, if you read that, so she was considering. The word she, that's a pronoun. Now, there's only, stop this, I don't really want that. Stop this one. Sorry. This is what I want here. So she, this is very important. She was considering. She is a pronoun replacing either Alice or her sister. So she was considering in her own mind. Here's the third person narrating again, telling us that we're in someone's mind. It's actually Alice's mind. So she is Alice. And then there's this other mark, parentheses. You see it? The parentheses. Why is that important? Because parentheses is kind of like a sidebar. It's like a little side note. You don't really need to know it, but the narrator, the third person narrator, is telling us it's a nice thing to know. So if you were to ignore what is between the parentheses, so she was considering in her own mind whether the pleasure of making a daisy chain. You see what I'm saying? You can skip right over the parentheses and go to whether the pleasure of making a daisy chain. And you'd have the sentence going on. But the parentheses enrich what's going on in her own mind. So let's read what's between those parentheses. As well as she could, as well as she could. For the hot day made her feel very sleepy and stupid. Think about that for a moment. Have you ever felt stupid? Have you ever felt sleepy? Maybe some of you are sleeping now. Don't be sleeping when I'm reading and analyzing. Please. Don't be doing that. But if you felt sleepy and stupid, the narrator's telling us she was considering in her own mind whether she should make a daisy chain. If you don't know what a daisy chain is, you can look that up. Daisy chain is a string of daisies. Could be a necklace, could be a crown on her head. Would be worth the trouble of getting up and picking and we stop because we have to turn the page. And if we turn the page, it says, pay attention, because I'm not going to show you this. Daisies, when suddenly a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close by her. All of those words before the white rabbit runs close by her is a prelude to the white rabbit coming into the picture. Okay, now we know there's a rabbit because Down the Rabbit Hole is the title of the chapter. The illustrator put a rabbit up there, right? So she was there, she was bored, she's considering, she's feeling sleepy and stupid when suddenly this white rabbit comes by. All of those words, if you're looking for the complete thought is nowhere to be found except on the page. You have to turn the page, and we'll do that in the next analysis. But the sentence is a white rabbit ran. A white rabbit ran. Let me write that out. A white rabbit ran. If we were to sum up these two sentences, Alice was tired and a white rabbit ran. You can add by her if you'd like. That's all this says. However, when you go back and you look at the punctuation and you look at the way the words are framed by the narrator, and in this case it's Lewis Carroll writing, but the third person is outside the story. He's weaving a story for us about a Alice, who's a small girl, right, reading with her sister on the bank. She's bored, B-O-R-E-D, but he never uses the word bored. Isn't that interesting? Like some of you out there say, well, I'm just bored. Instead, he shows us how bored she is. And ladies and gentlemen, there's a difference between telling and showing. Showing is much more powerful when you show people what you're trying to really narrate about. And in this case, her sister's reading a book, which doesn't have pictures. She's bored, right? She looks at it. It's not interesting to her. She's thinking about making a daisy chain, daisies, whether it's worth the trouble of getting up and doing it. Is it worth the trouble? Oh my God, she's so bored. And suddenly this white rabbit runs by her. And so begins Alice's adventures in Wonderland. If you have any questions, Jimmy, don't forget to email me, right? Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com, readingwithjimmy.com, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you for the next chapter.